Hi everyone, my name is Anna Kottsova. I'm a PhD candidate at ETH Zurich and TU Delft, and it is my pleasure today to present to you our work on mixing-induced mineral precipitation and its impact on flow and transport in porous media. So first, to give you a little bit of the background, when we talk about geothermal operations, one of the most common processes is reinjection of produced brine back into the reservoir. And during geothermal operations, there are multiple processes happening in the surface facilities, which can alter the composition of the geothermal brine. For example, corrosion, bacterial activity, or scaling. So when this fluid is reinjected, the differences between the injected and the reservoir fluids can cause chemical reactions, such as dissolution or precipitation in the near wellbore zone, which can affect the injectivity of a system, which will directly affect the efficiency of the whole operation. So understanding the evolution of these processes is crucial for optimal planning. In this work, we focus on mineral precipitation and its dynamics in the porous media. So to actively capture the dynamic change of the rock properties during mixing-induced precipitation, we decided to choose XRECT-assisted core flooding experiments as our main experimental approach. As in the system design, we mix two incompatible fluids, one that comes at a high pore velocity as the injection fluid, and the other comes at a low pore velocity representing the background flow. As the two fluids mix, they form barite. We chose barite due to purely experimental reasons because barite has high density compared to Berea sandstone that we used as a rock matrix. So its density, which is almost twice as large, allows for its visibility in the CT scanner and makes it a very attractive mineral for the experiments. So throughout the experiment, we constantly monitor overall pressure as well as differential pressure to assess the permeability not only in the whole core, but also in the sections of the core. In addition to that, we want to visualize the precipitation. However, if you have worked with the CT scanning, you know that the full 3D scanning reaching high resolution is a very time-consuming process, and it also produces large amounts of data. So we found a simpler approach, a more suitable approach for our case. And throughout the experiment, we are taking in situ radiographs of the whole system, so a 2D scan of the whole core, where we assess the difference in density between the pre-experimental image and the images throughout the experiment. But also we want to get the high resolution data as well. So before and after the experiment, we perform a full 3D scanning of the sample, as well as scanning electron microscopy of the thin sections after the experiment. In this work, I present results of the two experiments. I refer to them as low and high flow rate scenarios. You can see the details on the table, but these two experiments also allow us to look at the dynamics of the system when we change the fluid velocities and how it affects the mixing and the results in precipitation. So we first looked at the temporal evolution of the front. And here in the results of the both experiments show us similar behavior. At first, we see an increase of the pressure signal in the very first stages, and then the pressure signal appears to be stable. So we do not see much changes in the permeability. However, if we look at the differential pressure signal and consequently the permeability of different sections, then we will see that the precipitation in the sections was actually ongoing because the permeability kept dropping throughout the injection, which to us means that while there was major impact on precipitation, on permeability during the first stages of injection, the precipitation was continuous. And we also see the same effect from the CT data that we took. Here I present them in the form of average grayscale value, which are 4 different sections along the core depth, and their change in this value over time over the injection of fluids. Here, by the increase of the signal, which to us means the increase of the density, so deposition of barite in the system, we see the accumulation of deposits and also the propagation of it through the depth. We see it in both experiments. So while fluids are mixing and reacting in the top sections of the core, they're not reacting fully. And some of the reactive ions can be transported further downstream. In the second part of the core, we see slightly different dynamics. You have probably noticed very sharp peaks in the pressure. They correspond to blockage of the outlet. So we interpret it as when the boundary is established, two fluids start bypassing each other and mixing at the outlet. This results in clogging of the tubes, in clogging of the outlet end cap, because according to the experimental design that we created, the faces of the core are equipped with the end caps with fluid distribution networks. This allows for much better mixing compared to the pore space. So as soon as fluids reach the outlet in sufficient concentrations and start actively mixing, this creates chemical precipitation. We also see this in the CT data. As you see in the last outlet section of the core, there is a strong increase of the signal corresponding to the same time as the pressure increase that we recorded. We estimate the effect on permeability between 10 and 20% reduction of the initial values. And now we will look at the high resolution imaging data, which tells us about precipitation patterns and the microstructure of the formed deposits. So the first thing we see is the curtain-like shape of the formed boundary, which is governed by the fluid pattern in the rock. So governed by the ratios between the side and the main injection fluid. We also see, as we hypothesized before, that the mineral precipitation occurs primarily at the interface of the fluids and does not propagate much into the rock matrix. However, if we compare the low flow rate and high flow rate scenarios, we will see that significant difference in the thickness of the formed front. We see that the front is thicker in the high flow rate scenarios. So we understand that the higher velocity actually facilitates mixing and creates wider fronts and increases effect on the rock porosity and rock permeability. We also see the change in the front thickness when we assess the samples from top to bottom, which is due to more pronounced lateral mixing in the top sections of the core, and later as the fluid get diverted and go in parallel, mixing is less pronounced and the front is thinner. Later, we took the whole core and we cut it into thin sections and analyzed it with SEM. So here I'm presenting the data only from one thin section from a high flow rate experiment. And what is interesting to us is that we identified two forms of deposits which can correspond to different regimes in the pore space. The first type are unstructured accumulations in large pores. So this type of deposit indicate significant mixing that was happening in the pore space. So these were the pores of high velocity, high mixing area, so high advection regime. And there is a second shape of deposits, which are needle-shaped deposits. This morphology indicates uninterrupted growth of the mineral. So it means that this was a low velocity area, which was mainly controlled by diffusion. Another important feature that we see is that in the large accumulations, we still do not see complete blockage of porosity. So the structure contains microporosity, which is important to us because we understand that it still allows for solute transport across this boundary, which comes along the pressure data that we've seen when we have observed a continuous decline in permeability. So even though there is no active mixing in the area anymore, the diffusion still happens, which still allows for more mineral precipitation and more permeability reduction in the zone. If you're interested to see more data from the X-ray CT that we actually obtained, you can scan this QR code and see the animations from the 2D scanning that we performed, which show the same data as the grayscale value above. And we're now in the process of publishing this manuscript. We are submitting it to the journal. But if you're interested in more details, if you have questions, or if you want to discuss the topic, please reach out to me via LinkedIn or via email, and I'll be happy to receive your questions. Thank you very much for your attention.